So let's talk about the next wave of Codex releases. First up, we have the officially unveiled Codex Aeldari, and then apparently after that, the bugs from Beyond the Galaxy are on the way. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking about the next few releases from Games Workshop's Codex lineup, official confirmation of Codex Aeldari, their new cover art, and exactly what's going to be in the book, and then the news that the Nids are also on the horizon. Let's talk about the Eldar first, and then go on to the Tyranids. First of all, we have Codex Aeldari. We've seen really quite a lot of previews for this already, plus lots and lots of leaked rules. We kind of already knew that it was coming for a bunch of different reasons, Harlequin's datasheets being in that leaked codex, and the titles on their preview boxes being Aeldari ones rather than Craft Worlds. Here in all its glory though is the cover of the new Codex Aeldari, and I must admit I do really like the artwork on it. I think it might be one of my favourite artwork pieces out of all the books that have come out in 9th edition so far. It's the same for the new artwork on the box sets for their miniatures. I really quite like the contrast between the same hand red and the otherworldly blue backdrop. Really works well for the brightly coloured space elves. They've got an Autarch with swooping hawk wings, Starglaive and Reaper launcher front and centre, and plenty of the other units in the backdrop, a Warlock casting some powers, Guardians, Striking Scorpions, Wraith Lords and Grav Tanks. Looks like a very cool book to me. Just from the leaks and what was rumoured to be in it, I did suspect that this combined Aeldari Codex might be a truly mammoth book, and indeed they confirm that it's almost the same size as Codex Space Marines, 200 pages worth of book. The revamped Craft Worlds rules sit alongside all the reimagined rules for the Harlequins, the new rules for the Inari, and Corsairs are confirmed to be in the book in some capacity. At the moment I'm not sure whether they're just going to be the one datasheet, or if they're going to have their other rules sections and support. Just in general, by turning all of these factions into one big book, every single one of these armies is likely to have its own warlord traits, relics, psychic powers, army-wide special rules, stratagems and own unique datasheets, which doesn't really make me too surprised that it's 200 pages long. Never mind any content that they also have for Crusade, army lore and miniature galleries. I feel that for Inari the change might well be a good one, to be honest. So far they've been relegated to a whole bunch of supplements or even White Dwarf codexes. Much better and easier to have them folded in alongside the Craft World rules, which odds are you might well need anyway if you want to collect an army of them. For Harlequins, however, the change might be a bit more of a mixed blessing. Currently they do actually have their own codex as a standalone book, and while I'm sure they'll get some interesting stuff out of this, it's hard to imagine that Games Workshop will support them quite as well as if they'd had their own 9th edition codex released in full. In general, from the leaked bits of the new codex so far, it does seem that they have most of the sections that you'd expect. Maybe the one casualty of the Harlequins has been their masks. It appears that rather than having 5 or 6 different ones, they do appear to only have 3 different mask forms now, light, dark and twilight. Still though, I think there's certainly positives to be rolling in the codex as well. It definitely did feel like a bit of a mini-faction, maybe fairly similar to the Imperial Guard Tempestus Scions. Hopefully, as well as losing a touch of individuality, they might gain access to a fair few powerful tools from the Craft World. Otherwise though, from all else that we've seen, you can check out the other leaked datasheet reviews I've made on the channel. It does seem that the rules have really been overhauled, maybe in a similar sort of way to how the Tau Codex was redone, as opposed to a few of the others that have only had minimal changes. Though so far I think we've only seen the one new datasheet in the Shroud Runners, the Eldar range having really quite a lot of miniatures that they just need to replace the models for. So I'm sure the vast majority of time and development effort has gone into those. In any case, it looks like a pretty exciting time for Eldar players, the biggest Eldar codex that there's ever been, and a huge amount of their most ancient kits being reimagined. Next up though, as well as showing the face of the known Eldar release, it seems that Games Workshop is showing that the Tyranids will be coming next. In a paragraph below talking about the Eldar Craft World Codex, paraphrasing that, they basically say after Craft Worlds, it's the Tyranids. I must admit, Nids do feel like a bit of a surprising choice out of the 6 codexes that remain. I felt with the content that they'd released for them, including Warzone Octarius and that Crusher Stampede formation, that they might well be just really delaying the release of the Tyranid Codex, and giving players some really quite decent supplemental rules to keep them going until that date arrives. Out of any of the current 8th edition codexes, Tyranids are by far the strongest. Warzone Octarius Rising Tide gave them some really powerful new options in that Leviathan supplement, decent damage boosting stratagems, and some really helpful warlord traits for commanding the swarm. As well as that, they have those synaptic links, which give them powerful new command abilities on their Tyranid leaders. And then in White Dwarf, that Crusher Stampede Army of Renown came out, and that made Nids Arcanifexes into a true force to be feared. As a result of both of these, Tyranids are a very strong army in the game right now. Probably the absolute top build is a Crusher Stampede one right now, but even if you leave that at home, you can still make very decent lists with a few Hive Guard and Leviathan builds with things like the Swarm Lord, Gene Stealers and Gaunts. I would have argued that out of the remaining codexes, things like Guards, Knights, Chaos Marines and Demons all might need a bit more of an update compared with Tyranids. Though to be honest, Games Workshop very rarely seems to release codexes to armies that need an update. I just don't think that that's something that factors in with their scheduling. They just decide to release the codexes in the order that makes more sense for them. Still though, I really don't think that there'll be many Tyranid players complaining that their codex is coming sooner rather than later. Getting a 9th edition book is far better than not having one if you're trying to play in 9th edition. You'd have their access to their full set of Crusade rules. A lot of datasheets are just kind of underwhelming right now unless you're using crazy rules like that Crusher Stampede. I'd say that almost universally from the core codex, the Hive Fleet traits, the relics and the Warlord traits, all of those are just horribly underwhelming compared with other codexes right now, even if the Tyranid stratagems do seem quite strong. There's definitely multiple sections of the codex that could be made a lot more meaningful. Just about every 9th edition codex has come with some drastically rewritten datasheets. We've kind of already seen one thing that's likely to be coming for the Tyranids in the massively buffed Gene Stealer rules from Gene Stealer Cult. 4+ invul saves and AP-3 claws are pretty terrifying, and potentially might be a lot more so in Tyranids if they're able to layer better buffs on them. I also think that some consolidation of rules really would quite help the Tyranids. They're a faction where the rules are spread out with a whole load of different codexes and supplements right now. It'd be handy to have things like adaptive physiologies and synaptic links within the codex. Though judging by past precedent, I'd be very surprised if the Codex Leviathan supplement was in Codex Tyranids, and the same for that Crusher Stampede thing from White Dwarf. Perhaps that could be kind of annoying to have DLC that you might want to own that's come out before the codex even comes out. In game, I must admit that I'd be very apprehensive what happens if they do revamp the Tyranid monsters and they make them quite strong on their raw datasheet costs. It feels that if they point the Tyranid monsters fairly, and then you add the Crusher Stampede buffs on top of that, you're going to have an absolute powerhouse of an army, perhaps with the potential to be the strongest thing in the entire game. I just think that you perhaps can't really have Tyranid monsters costed at an appropriate price, and also have Crusher Stampede in full operation. It could be a recipe for some janky rules. Finally, model-wise, we do know that at least one model is coming for the Tyranids. Games Workshop showed off some Tyranid beastie in the preview that they gave out at New Year. They really didn't show enough of it to be very specific about what it is, some membranous wings, tentacles, and potentially this weird elongated claw thing that they previewed in a previous rumour engine. Currently I'm not entirely sure what this is at the moment. I have seen some people theorising that it might represent the parasite of Mortrex, an old special character type unit that went away a few editions ago. He had some pretty fun lore and in-game abilities, able to make enemy units burst after he's implanted rippers into them. And to be fair, I could see these combined parts perhaps combining to make a version of this thing that you can see in the bottom left. It certainly has wings, tentacles and long spindly claws. Still though, could be certainly something much different, maybe a big Tyranid wing beastie, or maybe shrikes or something, and we might have more nids on the way for all we know. Beyond that, we still don't know what codexes are coming after. I think there's only 5 40k codexes left to come out in 9th edition now, and it maybe seems likely that Chaos or Chaos Knights might be one of the ones to follow. Chaos are going to be having a fairly decent model release, and we've seen a Chaos Knights previews. If we find out any more news though, I'll certainly mention it on the channel. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Tyranid players, are you looking forward to a revamp? Eldar players, do you like the new cover of your codex? And what are your hopes and fears for the new books? If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where I will certainly keep the regular 40k content coming, with new videos out just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying the videos on the channel quite a bit, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page, and you can find that down in the video description below. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, including seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, an enormous thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.